want to share with you today what I call my tithing testimony. Okay, so um, here we go. Many years ago, I was living with a woman who was reading a book titled Think and Grow Rich. Intrigued by the title, I asked her what it was about. One thing she mentioned that stood out for me was the power of tithing to gain wealth. I first heard of tithing back in a high school history class. It was 1/10 of one's income traditionally given to the church, but I don't remember anything about it being a way to become wealthy. At the time we broke up a few years later in 1983, I was working 20 hours a week as a telemarketer for $500 a month. I made calls on behalf of an installation company back in the day when Pacific Gas and Electric offered a zero interest loan program for homeowners to finance insulating their homes. The thought was that if people had insulated their homes, they wouldn't use as much power and they would be able to repay the loan with the money they saved on their utility bill. From PG&E's point of view, the benefit was if people didn't use a lot more power, they didn't have to build a lot more things to generate the power. So it was a win-win. I made appointments for a home inspection, and if the appointment resulted in the prospect buying an installation job, I was supposed to get a commission. However, although sales must have been made, I never saw any commissions. Looking back on that time, I don't even know how I managed to make ends meet. I was just barely able to pay my bills. So it wasn't long before I began looking for a better job. One day, while scanning the newspaper, that's how long ago that was, I noticed an ad for a radio station looking for someone. Having worked professionally in radio back in New York, I stopped and read it more closely. I was disappointed to discover that it wasn't actually a paying job, but rather a volunteer opportunity. Someone was going to be starting a local Christian radio station there in Santa Rosa and was looking for individuals to volunteer 4 hours per week. Needless to say, I continued reading the want ads. However, after another week or so without much success in finding anything, something occurred to me relating to tithing. Although I couldn't see how I could possibly tithe on my minimal cash income, I realized that if I actually had a 40-hour-a-week job, 4 hours a week would be 10%. The radio station ad was still in the paper, so I contacted them. I believed in God, however, I wasn't a Christian at that time. Despite that, I submitted my application and I got the job. Shortly thereafter, I began training at the radio station, which wouldn't actually be going on the air for at least another month. Back on the old job, I wasn't the only one calling to make appointments. One afternoon, a coworker got off the phone from what was obviously a personal call. We were friends, so I casually asked who had she been talking with. When she told me it was her dad, for some unknown reason I asked what type of work he did. She told me that he sold wine over the phone. I was intrigued. Later that week, I went down to the place her dad worked to apply for a job. The sales manager who did the hiring commented several times that my timing was impeccable, and after reviewing my extensive qualifications as a telemarketer, he offered me a position. Although I was only going to be working 10 more hours a week for a total of 30 hours, he was offering me double what I had made at my old job, $1,000 a month. As it turned out, I took home significantly more than that with the commissions I earned and actually received. As a result of these events, which I believed were not purely coincidental, I came to the conclusion that my decision to tithe was an invitation I had offered God to show me that He was my provider. As a result, I came to trust that God would take care of me financially. Shortly thereafter, I started working as a volunteer at the Christian radio station, and a few months later, I became a follower of Christ. When I started attending church, I began to tithe from my gross income, and a habit that I've continued to practice for the past 40 years. In all that time, I have never gone without. I always had adequate income, a place to live, food to eat, and a working vehicle to get me from point A to point B. But there is more to this story. Late in 2018, when I was out to dinner with my wife, I realized something. Back in 2000, when my daughter was 16 and began working, she relied on tips for a large part of her income. That was when I got into the habit of giving service people a 20% tip. After all, I thought any one of them could have been my daughter. What occurred to me was, although I was consistently giving service people 20%, I was still only giving God 10. It was then that I purposed to give Him 20% as well. Despite the fact that my income didn't increase, I discovered that although I was giving 20%, I was still able to comfortably take care of my family's expenses. Coincidentally, during this time, I discovered that my hearing would benefit significantly from hearing aids. However, I didn't think I could afford even the $1,500 hearing aids from Costco. When I'd ask someone to repeat what they said, I used to jokingly explain that I was saving up for hearing aids. That wasn't quite true, as I wasn't actually putting any money aside specifically for that purpose. In 2019, after mentioning one morning at a men's breakfast at my church that I was saving up for hearing aids, one of the other men came up to me afterwards. He said he had an extra pair of hearing aids that I could have. When I went in to get them adjusted to fit my personal hearing needs, I was told that they were $5,000 hearing aids. To me, that was evidence God had honored my increased tithe and reinforced my belief that He was my provider. I continued in this confidence for several months until I had to do my taxes in 2018. That's when I discovered an unexpected $1,500 tax bill. This came as quite a shock, since in previous years I hadn't had to pay any taxes at all, and didn't have anywhere near enough withheld to cover that amount. To be honest, my first thought was, can I still afford to give God His 20%? But the more I thought about it, the more I came to believe that this was a test, not of God's ability to provide as much as just how committed I was to my giving the 20%, and how much I trusted God to meet my needs. After considerable soul searching, I chose to stand in my commitment to give 20%. I'm not sure how it happened, but I was able to comfortably pay the tax bill without having to borrow any money, forgo paying any other bills, or otherwise having to do without. Suffice it to say, I have come to firmly believe that God is ultimately our provider, and tithing is a way to recognize and live in that reality. Although a commitment to tithe can look like a big challenge, it's one that He can, and I believe wants, to help us meet, because it's a powerful way for Him to demonstrate His love and His desire and ability to take care of us. So here's why I'm presenting this message. I'm not suggesting that everyone should be tithing what they're tipping, but if you haven't been tithing at all, it might be worth considering giving a percentage, whatever that might be, of your income. That way, if God wants to increase the amount He's getting from you, All he has to do is increase the amount you're getting. Of course, you'll never have to wait for him if you decide you want to give more. So take Malachi up on the challenge God gave to put him to the test, put God to the test by tithing. Okay, thank you.